So let's just review a little bit where we've been so far with Aristotle. Um, what has he said so far? I'm going to use some words that he doesn't use, but this is how I sort of interpret it. Human action is purposive. And purposive is just maybe a fancy word for saying having a purpose. And what does that mean? It has a certain structure, right? That is, we act. And our action is directed towards some end, purpose, goal, aim, the reason for which we do something, that which our act aims at. And he characterizes this as the good. A question is immediately raised. Which is, I think, a great question, and a question that'll sort of be in the background of this thing. When we aim towards the good, are we aiming towards what is actually good, or just what we think is good, or what appears good to us? Well, I think that he leaves that open. I think that he leaves it open. Clearly, sometimes we aim towards what we think is good, but is not good. I think that, but that doesn't mean that he believes that the good is completely relative. That is, that there is no good, that every good is as good as every other good, to put it. But let's just put that question in the background just for the moment. But he has said something else. Putting it in the way that it appears to me now, it can be put in different ways, but over and above the individual goods that we pursue, getting something to eat, getting a grade in a class, getting a college education, getting new prescription for your glasses because your eyes have changed, buying clothes. I mean, all these things, anything that we pursue can be viewed as a good. But over and above the individual goods that we pursue, there's a greatest good, what he, in our translation, is called the chief good, but is usually, in Latin, it's very famous Latin, the summum bonum, the greatest good. A chief good, that is, it's a good not just of a particular action, like a sandwich or a shirt or an education, but the good we aim at with our lives as a whole. That is, something which is not ever, and what's really important about this, that this greatest good it would be something that we always want for its own sake, never for the sake of something else. Most of the goods that we pursue, we can at least think of them as things that we consider good, things that we aim for, because they lead to other goods. That is, they're not things we want in themselves, they're things we want because they allow us to get something else. And Aristotle suggests that this could lead to a kind of an infinite regress. We seek this for the sake of that, and that for the sake of that, and that for the sake of that. And so ultimately, there would be no point. He thinks that that's ridiculous. There has to be an overall point. There has to be something that we always want for its own sake, and that when we pursue any particular good, we're trying to get that thing or achieve that thing. And he asked, well, what could this be? I mean, what could be the greatest good? And with some sort of, talking about it for a while, he has a fairly straightforward answer, and that's happiness. That is, if we think about what it is that each of us wants ultimately, and why we want the lesser goods, the individual goods that we do, we want them because we want to achieve happiness. So the Greek word for happiness is eudaimonia. So you might see Aristotle's moral philosophy referred to as eudaimonistic, and that just means happiness centered, revolving around happiness. That is, Aristotle believes that ethics, morality, is ultimately about achieving happiness. So far, so good. It makes perfect sense, and I think that it's a very reasonable account of, on a very general level, of how we live. We do the things that we do for a purpose, to achieve a goal. We at least believe that those goals are goods for us. Many of the things that we go for in life, we go for the sake of something else that we want. So the goods that we want are goods for us, not in themselves, but because they lead to other things. Like physical exercise, let's say. We want to go running or go to the gym, not because we particularly want to do that in itself, although I'm sure some people do, but because we want the effects of it, the health effects of it, or we're training for some athletic event. He's thinking of intermediate goods, goods that lead to other goods. And he is throwing in this idea that there has to be an ultimate goal, a greatest good, a summum bonum, and something that we always want for its own sake. And we want everything else for the sake of that thing too. And he identifies that as happiness. But as we saw, immediately, I think, a question is raised, and that is, what is happiness? Immediately, I think we will think, well, can you even define happiness per se? Or is there only happiness relative to individuals? That's another big question that is raised. But again, it's something that to keep in mind, but the answer to that question is kind of what the whole book is about, rather than any particular part of it. That is, can we say something about, maybe if we say, put it this way, or even this, that this is kind of what he's going for, an answer to this. What does happiness mean for a human being? What is true happiness? Again, I think it's very natural to say, well, happiness is happiness. Happiness is whatever makes you happy. But as we'll see, he doesn't think the matter is so simple. So, in a way, everything that follows now can be thought of as Aristotle's attempt to answer these questions. What is human happiness? What is it that makes a human being truly happy?